Of a Linear Circle, Part 1, Chapter 6, Home. Nazar's fall is so unexpected that he nearly spills onto the stone floor before Severus and Albus can draw their wands to catch him. And that is why I didn't want to push, Albus murmurs as Severus retrieves Nazar. A visit to Poppy might be in order, I think. It is possibly something that should have been done last night, Severus replies. For someone so blasted short, Nazar is heavier than he appears. He is, at least, breathing normally. Perhaps, Albus agrees, but as the portrait said, this is a magical working that has been performed exactly once, and we're dealing with the aftermath of that single working. I have to address the other heads of house and discern who our injured students are. We'll need to record their names and the incidents in question. After you've left our new friend with Poppy, I'll need your assistance to do the same for the Slytherins. It's more accurate to say I'll need to discuss the matter with my students and then pass those names and details on to you, Severus counters. Please inform Mr. Malfoy that the evening meeting just became this afternoon's, immediately after lunch. Albus nods, smiling, and leaves the room. The moment he is gone, Severus casts a disillusionment charm over himself and Nazar. It isn't perfect camouflage, but it will keep them from being harassed by curious students all the way to the hospital wing. Poppy walks out of her office just as Severus enters the room, dropping the charm. She gives his burden a curious inspection. Oh, I see. We've moved on to kidnapping grown wizards for nefarious purposes. Severus glares at her. No, we've resorted to even odder things than that. He places Nazar onto the first empty bed he comes to. We have an adult wizard who was locked inside a damned portrait until yesterday evening. Poppy looks shocked. That isn't just a silly rumor? It seems he needs to re-educate some of his Slytherins on the meaning of subtlety. It is not. However, he seemed fine until he performed a single bit of magic. I see. Poppy begins a wand-casted diagnostic spell and halts in confusion. 2 life signs. Nazar's eyes crack open before he focuses on Severus and Poppy in turn. Healer, he rasps. Matron, but I suppose you could consider it the same thing, Poppy says. It's fine, has to keep Poppy from leaping backwards when the hissing of a parcel mouth emerges from Nazar's lips. Kanza removes herself from Nazar's neck and curls up in a glittering black circle on the white pillow near Nazar's head. Nazar's hissing repeats itself before his lips part in a faint smile. Be easier now. I should certainly hope so, Poppy declares. I didn't know we had another parcel mouth. She lifts her chin and recasts the spell, then frowns. Well? Severus asks, growing impatient with her silence. No physical ailments or signs of infirmity, which is good considering I don't know what I'd do about either for a man who dwelled in a portrait. Poppy's tone of voice reflects her poor opinion of that decision. He has a strong magical core, but one that hasn't been accessed properly in quite some time. That would certainly fit where your new friend spent his time recently. His magic would have mistaken that first spell as a terrible drain on his resources, panicked, and declared that a prompt nap was necessary in order to prevent damage. As long as he completes that nap and reintroduces himself to spell work in a more cautious manner, he will be fine. Severus lets out a brief sigh. Thank you. Poppy nods, lingering long enough to use magic to remove the man's green robes before she shoves them at Severus. He shakes his head and hangs them from the nearest robe hook, listening to Poppy mutter dire things about headaches under her breath as she steals the tie from Nazar's hair. How are your stores of Dittany? Poppy flicks a sheet into place, then holds out her hand for Kanza's inspection. The woman either has no fear or rumors of a new basilisk hasn't made much progress. For a normal school term, they should be fine. We're about to have an influx of 28 students bearing cursed wounds. Send off for more by owl, Severus requests. I'll be brewing more. I don't trust it to remain a normal school term. Right then, I'll do that at once. Poppy gives him a nod and then retreats into her office, shutting the door. Wasn't one spell. Severus glances down to see Nazar's eyes open again, if unfocused. More like 2 or 3. No, Kanza says 4, and that I can't count. What did you do to the pink toad? Severus asks. Don't insult toads that way. Known some perfectly respectable toads. Nazar smiles. I did my job, Severus. The castle's magic was behind my words. Don't think she would have admitted to anything otherwise. Severus knows that Hogwarts teachers and its overspangled headmaster have lost quite a bit of the castle's magical workings since the time of the founders, but that is like nothing he's ever heard of. How did you know about the blood quill? Scent. Blood magic's one thing. Blood magic used to harm. That's different. Nazar blinks several times in an attempt to focus on him. You should go. Kids to look after, Severus. Severus is trying to ignore the cold chill running down his back. You can sense the presence of blood magic meant to harm. Yes, I'm aware of the mark, all the time. I'd remove it if you'd let me, Nazar whispers and passes out again. Severus finds himself reaching out towards Nazar's shoulder and freezes with his hand lingering too close. The idea that the mark could be removed before the Dark Lord's defeat, if they find Potter, then he could truly consider ceasing to spy for the Order. He hasn't gained much useful information, which is a far cry from the last war. At least then, the Cruciatus curse had seemed a small price to pay. Severus notes the dark brown stubble on Nazar's face. "You didn't shave this morning," he says in a low voice, and then bites back a smile. It's foolishness, perhaps. It's likely Nazar wouldn't have recognized this modern version of those implements, and Severus refuses to keep a straight razor in his quarters. He watches as Kanza perks up and slides along the pillow into Nazar's hair. He thinks she's going to sleep there when he realizes that the basilisk is crawling directly into his hand. "Oh, no," he requests, trying not to wince. "You should stay here." Kanza ignores them, climbing his sleeve, then his shoulder, before deliberately poking her head beneath the collar to his shirt before she wraps herself around his neck. Severus presses his lips together and tries not to make any sudden movements. "I am not comfortable with this." Kanza readjusts herself until her grip around his neck isn't as tight, but otherwise has made it clear she's settled in for the duration. Severus gives up. "Fine, but I'm bringing you back here as soon as I'm done." Severus stops by the Great Hall, where lunch is still being served. He catches Draco's eyes. The boy nods to show that the message was received. Severus inclines his head at Draco and continues on to his office. He normally buys enough Dittany for a year of classroom use, but no matter what, he'll need to brew more essence of Dittany. Preparing a cauldron for that reduction will take up the rest of the lunch hour and provide an excellent distraction. Kanza also provides distraction when she won't stop peering out of his shirt collar or resting her head on his shoulder to observe. "You really need to make up your mind," Severus tells her, frowning. "Unlike your translator, I'm not used to wearing basilisks on my person." Kanza blinks her emerald eyes at him. "Yes, I am saying that you are tickling me." She flicks her tongue out at his hair, but stops crawling back and forth. Instead, she loops herself over his shoulders, scenting the air as the first wafts of shimmering Dittany rise into the air. "Watch out, it's flammable." Kanza obligingly keeps her head further down from the cauldron. "I am brewing a minor potion with a 1,000-year-old infant basilisk," Severus thinks, and tries to figure out how the hell he went from Halloween depression to this. He's all but certain that in this instance he is correct to blame Nazar. Severus gives the students enough time to gather in the common room before he joins them. At his request, Kanza is politely hiding beneath the collar of his shirt so she does not distract the Slytherins from the purpose of this meeting. Aside from defense, Albus only canceled the classes that take place in the hour after lunch, not the entire afternoon. Warrington scrambles upright as soon as he notices Severus. "Sir, is the pink toad really gone?" "That is not actually what I'm here to speak to you about, but yes, the pink toad has departed," he replies, and is unsurprised by a widespread rush of relief. "You've three guesses to who is replacing her, and no, it isn't me." Miss Bulstrode's eyes light up. "It's going to be him, isn't it? The portrait who isn't a portrait." Severus frowns. "You all do recall what subtlety is, yes? Within the span of 2 hours, the entire school knows of Nazar Slytherin's presence via portrait. Do try not to immediately blab all you learned to the entire student body." "We're finally going to have two Slytherins at the faculty table." The elder Greengrass sibling looks shocked. "I thought I'd graduate before that happened, Professor." "I was beginning to believe I would be deceased before that time," he counters. Remember that there are times when pride should be focused upon and other times when it should be set aside. That pink-blasted toad was using a blood quill in Hogwarts. We know that she tortured 28 students with it, and yes, that is exactly what it is. Torture. Severus stares hard at them. Anyone who believes otherwise has never carved upon open their own hand with a writing implement over and over again. Please, do not, by the way. Right. Pritchard is starting to look a bit green. No plans on that, myself. Good. Now I will not make anyone stand up and out themselves if they're feeling shy, or if they feel that this is somehow a personal failing. It is not. I have seen the list of reasons that woman submitted for detentions, and literally all of those reasons were ludicrous. Severus crosses his arms and lets his eyes glance over the faces peering back at him. 10 Slytherins had detention with Umbridge, and he hopes that 10 of those 28 victims are not in this room. Miss Pruitt, he says, glancing at the only gentry residing in his house. What is the only thing that will possibly remove the scarring from a cursed wound? She frowns for a moment before her expression clears. Dittany, sir. An essence of dittany is more effective than that. Make no mistake. These wounds will scar you for life if they are left untreated, Severus tells them. I will be in my office until 2 o'clock. I'll return there at 4 o'clock and will be available until dinner at 6. If anyone has an injury that needs to be treated, no matter how trivial you believe it to be, do not hesitate. At the very least, consider that a scar is an identifying feature, you idiots. I'll go with you right now, sir, Daphne Greengrass says as she stands up. I'd like to have the best chance of my hand not scarring. I see. What did you do to infuriate the toad, Miss Greengrass? Severus asked politely. I told her that she was the most rubbish teacher we've ever had for defense against the dark arts, and that includes Gilderoy Lockhart, Miss Greengrass scowls. I really despise her for the fact that I had to say those words, but the quill torture that she claimed was ministry approved was not fun either. It was not approved by the ministry. Fudge is an imbecile, but he was being honest in that matter at least. Severus glances around the room, and when he realizes no one else is going to be as brave, has Miss Greengrass follow him to his office. You should have come to me the moment this happened, Severus says when his office door is closed. Miss Greengrass perches daintily on the edge of a chair. Ministry approved, we thought. You can't save us from the ministry, Professor. Severus frowns as he retrieves the small bottle of essence of dittany he brewed at the beginning of July. Like hell I can't, he mutters. This will not hurt, but it will most certainly look as if it does. Greengrass regards the process with a critical eye, and never once flinches. Severus doesn't ask what the shining white letters say, and she doesn't volunteer the answer. You'll need to do this twice more for the next 2 evenings. Do not skip either application. I believe the damage is minimal enough that it shouldn't scar, but I cannot guarantee the same if you don't return. What you should do is pay attention in potions so that you'll be in my NEWT class next year. Greengrass smiles at him ruefully. I'm a pureblood whose parents believe she's only useful for a good marriage. What would be the point of such a thing? Miss Greengrass, you have potential, Severus says, irritated by such easy capitulation. Do not waste that potential on another say-so. Your parents are not the only ones who have to live with your decisions for the rest of your life. If you make a good marriage, do so because you insist upon it, not because they do. Greengrass lowers her eyes, but she nods. Yes, sir. Severus escorts her from his office. Sometimes he despairs of any of them seeing sense. He has been firmly told that he isn't allowed to shake it into them. 5 minutes later, there is another knock on his door. Come in, Mr. Zabini. Severus waves the young man inside. And what did you do to rile the pink toad? Well, the Gryffindors are rather passionate in their insistence that you know who is alive, which is just good sense, I think, Sabini says. I didn't exactly jump on their party, but then the toad started pulling out insults based on skin color when we wouldn't knock off with it. I called her a right twat. Only regret I have is that my hand is still bleeding. She sent you away, deliberately, before the named punishment was complete. Severus frowns over Sabini's hand as he removes the cotton handkerchief Sabini tied around his bleeding wounds. If it's any assurance, she's going on trial for deliberate use of a banned dark artifact, along with 28 instances of abuse of a minor with a dark artifact. That's an Azkaban sentence, right off. Sabini smiles as the dittany is applied. Thank you, Professor. Severus gives him the same instructions that Miss Greengrass received regarding the next two treatments. Gryffindors, he mutters in derision after Zabini leaves. You finally stand up for the sake of someone in your own house, but only when he's not around to see it. Nazar jolts awake in the dark, his heart hammering in his chest. Nothing smells familiar. This is not his bed. He has no idea where he is. Then recognition filters in, and he drops his head back down onto the pillow. It's not fully dark. There are lamps with the flame turned down low scattered around. He can sense Hogwarts' magic, and Kansa is a warm loop around his neck. He is a person instead of a portrait, one who gets to wander around while trying to figure out why a great deal of his memories seem to be missing. Nazar sits up and discovers that his boots are sitting next to the bed, and his robes are hanging on a peg nearby. He doesn't see the healer, so he pulls on his boots and stands, relieved when everything feels normal. He puts his robe back on and makes his way to the exit, cracking open the double doors. Outside is a corridor populated with students all trotting in one direction. He takes a deep breath and discovers a faint scent of food on the air. If it's dark, then it's their dinner hour. Food might be nice, but he's in no mood to face a crowd of students. He also wants to know what became of his original classroom. Invisibilia in oculis vestris, he whispers. He holds out his arm to be certain the spell worked and sees nothing. To hell with that pathetic disillusionment charm. He's teaching the better version to Severus. He just has to figure out how to frame it as a trade first. Nazar steps out onto the corridor and stays close to the wall next to the door. There are no useful landmarks, so he follows the flow of students and discovers the grand stair. Better. He waits for an opportunity and then walks over to the railing, glancing down and counting to discover he's on the fourth floor. The tower he'd just come from was a healing hall, but in his time that had only taken up the first and second floor, not the fourth. The first floor had been for treatment, the second for recovery. Nazar mounts the stairs and climbs slowly, staying against the outer wall. He pauses as a pair of twin gingers slide down the stairwell banister. He watches them, feeling an unwilling smile spread across his face. They're adults, or close enough, and don't seem to be all that interested in letting adulthood take joy from their lives. If only so many others had held on to that same joy. Oh, good. He's gone maudlin, and doesn't even remember enough to know why. On the sixth floor landing, he encounters yet another pair of bright-haired gingers, possibly family to the older twins. Both boy and girl are tugging on the hands of a brown-haired girl who looks like Nizar feels. The youngest boy, one with a messy mop of dark red hair, is watching the others and biting his lip as he tries to figure out how to help. Come on, dinner. Food always helps, right? The ginger boy asks. He's wearing a prefect's badge, as is the girl who isn't ginger. I miss Harry, she says, which makes the other three students flinch. Halloween just made it worse, that's all. I'm not very hungry anyway. These Gryffindors must be the students who knew young Potter, the one Severus feels so guilty about. Severus might talk of how he hates having failed Lily Evans Potter, but Nazar merely fell out of a painting yesterday. He was born ages ago, and he knows better. You don't have to like someone to regret failing them, and Potter's disappearance is still eating at Severus. Nazar drops the invisibility charm and startles all four children. You should eat. Your friend would probably hate to think that you're needlessly harming yourself out of worry. The gingers stare at Nazar as if he's going to eat them, even though the ginger boy is taller than Nazar. The younger boy hangs back behind the girl. It's the brown-haired prefect who dashes at her eyes with both hands and looks up at him with interest and curiosity, instead of fear. You're our rumored portrait, then, she asks. Nazar reaches out and pokes the girl's shoulder with two fingers. Since when can portraits do this? I don't know. This castle does a lot of things it's not supposed to, the ginger girl ventures. Nazar nods in acceptance of her words. Excellent point, as that now includes me. I'm Nazar, Harivolt Slytherin, Gryffindors. Harivolt, the brown-haired prefect repeats. She even uses the proper V sound, not the more commonly mistaken W. That's the word that eventually became herald in modern English. Is that what you are? A herald? No. Nazar Harivolt was a name combined from two languages to mean little war leader, Nazar answers. Harold is about 3 centuries younger than Harivolt. You are incredibly well read. She smiles. That's the nicest thing anyone has said to me in a while, sir. You saying, sir, he's a Slytherin, the ginger boy blurts out. Yes, thus known for things like discretion and not shouting out random things in corridors, Nazar replies. Or should I immediately assume that you, like Godric, couldn't keep it in his trousers for more than a single day at a time? The ginger turns bright red. I would never. Never. Well, I hope then that you don't plan to wed someone who wants children. The ginger girl and her curly haired shadow start laughing. The ginger boy stands there, sputtering without managing to say any kind of word in its entirety. Oh, you're going to be fun. Verbal defense is another form of defense, you know. You are going to be our defense teacher, the ginger girl asks. That's the other rumor, that you're replacing the pink toad. Why does everyone have such terrible things to say about toads? Nazar wonders. As of, I suppose, Monday. Yes, you have to put up with learning defense from a Slytherin, he emphasizes, which puts the ginger boy right back to sputtering again. Nazar looks at the brown haired girl and lifts an eyebrow. Also, part of your defense, being well fed enough to lift your wand and cast proper spells in a manner timely enough to scathe your skin. Your friend isn't dead, young Gryffindor, and that is something known for certain. He is just exceptionally misplaced, which is all anyone knows. Go eat dinner, even if the most you manage is a slice of bread. Never starve yourself in a time of plenty. Famine rears its annoying head often enough. That seems to trigger the ginger boy into using real words. Not in the 20th century, mate. Ron, we know better, the brown haired girl says. You remember what Harry said. And we're not repeating that in front of the enemy, Ron snaps. Yes, definitely fun, Nazar says. The next time he puts his foot in it, cast non loqui, followed by the period of time you wish for silence. Never more than a day, or you risk harming someone who is not an enemy, just irritating. Hey, Ron the prefect blurts. You're the one who declared me your enemy. Suffer, Nazar responds blithely, and then continues his way up the stairs. Nazar does hope the prefect girl has dinner. He might be a partial amnesiac, but he's still capable of doling out useful advice. He did it for over 9 centuries while hanging on a fucking wall. But he non loqui, 5 minutes, the ginger girl snaps before Nazar can even make it round the stairwell curve. He has to take a moment, lean against the wall, and muffle near hysterical laughter. The seventh floor corridors are quiet when he arrives at what he knows is the right passageway. There is no door. He circles around that entire section of the seventh floor again to be certain. But still, no door. Why is there no door? Nazar glares at the blank stretch of wall. I know you're there. Where did they hide the damned door? He feels his way along the old stones, but he can't find anything. No sense of where a door might have been walled off, and no hint of magic that would signal a door being disguised. Where is my classroom? Where is my classroom? Where is my classroom? He repeats in anger. Then he takes a step back when the oak door materializes in the stone. Oh, that's clever. No, that's terrible. Who did this? Nazar asks. But there is no one in the corridor to answer him. There are no portraits, and the tapestry behind him doesn't hold the magic to speak. He suspects there is a reason for that, and that reason is associated with his missing door. Nazar pushes the door open. The wall sconces flare up in response, illuminating a space so familiar that it makes his chest hurt. The Slytherin common room is what he knows best, but this bestirs memories. He taught here, trained young ones to keep themselves safe and to defend others, no matter their blood or their status in society. His feet leave no prints. There is no layer of dust on the floor. The house elves were cleaning the room, perhaps, or maybe it's been so long since humans were inside that dust couldn't form. Nazar shuts the door behind him and gazes around, swallowing hard. There are no chairs or tables. The room is empty of everything except the other iron-bound oak door to his left. They knew they were going to move the classroom, he says aloud, his voice echoing in the empty space. They knew they were going to change the magic, hide this place. Why? The castle's magic can't answer that question. He is either not being specific enough or the castle doesn't know, just as she'd remained unaware of the foul magic Tom Riddle left behind. If Nazar teaches in this place, he'll have to arrive first and leave the door propped open. Otherwise, they won't be able to find the room, and he'd prefer to remain here. He might have cleansed the classroom downstairs, but this is his territory. He made this space, crafted it using Hogwarts magic to be what he needed. It can present students with outdoor spaces, targets to blast apart, shadows to twist into whatever they fear. Damn it! Nazar wipes his face dry with his robe sleeve. He remembers teaching his nieces and nephews in these rooms. He taught his children here. Children. The sound Nazar makes in response to remembering that significant fact is probably horrendous. He had children, 3 children, and they're all gone. He goes to the other door, running his hands over a metal S shape resting against the wood. Memory filters in, telling him what to do. Magisterdom, office, he murmurs, and then flips it. Herrebeorg, quarters, he says, and opens the door. There is a sitting room before him with gray stone walls, ceiling, and a floor. A cast iron candelabra hangs from the ceiling and holds fresh burning candles to light the room, assisted by 2 wall sconces. The rug on the floor is woven wool from the east. Closest to the door is a weathered trestle table, with 2 chairs that seem more modern than they should be. There is a window to the left that reveals a dark night and a waxing gibbous moon, and directly opposite is a sofa with dark green cushions. Nazar stares at it, eyes narrowed. That was not originally a sofa. That was a padded bench. The green velvet armchair nearby was not an armchair. It was a wooden rocking chair that someone made. Nazar sags against the doorframe, feeling a huge and terrible knot in his chest. Please let them still be there. Nazar ignores the obvious updates, likely the work of house elves. He closes his eyes, takes 6 steps forward into the room, and turns to his right. When he opens his eyes, their portraits are still there, on the wall above the sofa. Galliena, Bryce, and his youngest, Elfric. Their portraits were all painted when his children attained magical majority at age 14, trained and ready to apprentice themselves to a master of their chosen craft. They were all his children by magical adoption, dark-haired and pale-eyed Galliena, whose lips were always turned up at one corner, sandy-haired and green-eyed Bryce, who always smiled even if he was facing a battle, slender and Elfric, brown-haired and brown-eyed, who was quiet and sneaky in all the best ways. "Hello, you 3," Nazar whispers. "Hello, father," Galliena greets him. "Don't mind their silence. English is hard." "It really is. Refused to practice again, did they?" Galliena smiles. "We all know who the scholar in the family is, and it was not my brothers." "No, that was always you," Nazar agrees in a choked voice. "It's so good to see you." And you, father," Bryce manages, but his face screws up as he says each word. Elfric nods at him, looking frustrated. "They didn't believe we'd ever speak to you again," Galliena explains. "They stopped believing it true that you would return." Nazar lifts his shoulders in a careless shrug. "That's all right. I forgot I was a person for centuries." "The magic deteriorated that badly." Galliena shakes her head. "I am surprised you remember us at all." "I almost didn't." Nazar swallows. "I refuse to forget you." Kanza releases her hold on his neck and glides out onto his shoulder, rearing up to look at the portraits before she hisses her own greeting. Elfric's eyes light up as he responds in parcel tongue. "Hello, Kanza. Father, you best not have forgotten this." "No, I haven't," Nazar smiles at them. "Bryce." Bryce looks like he wants to weep. "Parseltongue never changes." "No, and thank the gods for small favors." Kanza's tongue darts out. "I miss them." "So do I." "Wait, you're not trapped here, are you?" Nazar asks in sudden fear. "Us? No. We're just portraits. We go where we please," Galliena assures him. "We will try to get better at English, father. It really makes people unhappy when they hear Parseltongue these days." "Cowards," Elfric spits. "Be nice. The current terror of the British Isles is a Parselmouth cousin of yours." "Oh, him." Bryce frowns in disapproval. "We're aware. Such a blowhard." We're going to warn the other portraits to expect a lot of hissing in the days to come, Galliena says. Most of them still understand Old English. It shouldn't be that hard for you to pick up on it again. You said it was the easiest language of them all to learn the first time. I'll keep them that in mind. Nazar watches as they depart, trying not to feel bereft. They are only portraits. His children are long dead. He wonders if they knew what foolishness he'd agreed to. He wonders what Salazar said to convince him it was necessary. Nazar glances around the room again. He raised his children in these rooms, but it's obvious they'd all gone on to their own quarters or dwellings. The furniture is meant for one person, not many. Bryce was already dead. Nazar sits down hard on the rug-covered floor. He remembers that now. Bryce died at the hands of a magician who'd used foul blood magic to turn an entire village full of people into slaves. Bryce won, defeating his enemy, but succumbed to the injuries he received during that magical battle. Elfric went south to see about collecting students from England. Beyond that, he can't yet recall. Galliena married and settled in to become a scribe of some renown, while her kind-hearted husband handled the raising of their children. If Nazar has descendants at all, it will be from that line. Elfric had been entirely uninterested in marriage or dalliances of any sort. He can feel magic beneath his hands. The rug is all but saturated by a preservation charm. If that was protected, it's a safe wager that everything else is, too. Nazar gets up from the floor and forces himself to continue exploring. On the old table is a charmed and large rock that is warm to the touch. Look what I found, dearest. Kanza glides down his arm and settles on the stone, scenting it. It no longer smells of serpent. I will fix that. I'm certain you will. Nazar glances over at the sofa, recalls what the small square tables in Severus's quarters look like, and conjures one to place next to the sofa, though the wood matches what it sits next to. Hold tight. I'm relocating you. Kanza hisses with laughing glee as she rides her original warming stone to its new pride of place on the conjured table. That was fun. Not as much fun as exploring with you, but fun. She peers over the rock's edge. My very own table. You spoil me, favorite. I'm glad you like it. Nazar leaves her to explore both rock and the new table. He peers into the garderobe, the bathroom, and discovers that it has also been updated to modern standards. He still suspects house elves, given what they've said to him about knowing his identity. The magical cycling privy box that kept the stench out has been replaced with a commode. He'd been so happy last night to have gathered enough context over the years to know exactly what a flush toilet was when he found the first example. The original freestanding copper tub has been replaced with a true tiled bathtub that's nearly large enough to hold two people comfortably. The table that held basin and pitcher of water is now an inset sink with plumbing and a mirror. There are shelves with more of those gigantic new towels, though on another shelf are his original toiletries. Excellent. He desperately wants to shave in the morning. The far side of the sitting room has a short hallway with an intersection of 3 doors. He pushes open the door on the right, which was once Elfric and Bryce's shared sleeping chamber. When they moved out, it became his personal office so he could hide from his students. He left a trundle bed under a padded bench in case of visitors. He'd had a few of those. Often it was Godric when he was too far gone into his cups and all but planting his face on Nazar's table. The bench has been replaced by a sofa, just like the sitting room, but a bed on wheels hides beneath it. The cushions on this one are a smoky gray with blue and silver lurking in the fabric. Nazar touches one of the bound books on the shelf and feels yet more preservation magic beneath his fingers. He's starting to suspect that everything that could be obliterated by the centuries was treated to it, and that house elves are once again responsible. None of the magic feels familiar enough to suspect himself, Salazar, or the others. They would have been thinking more of Hogwarts' magic, which naturally preserves the paintings and books within its walls. He abandons the office and pushes open the central door, which held his own sleeping chamber. The faint smell of beeswax enters his nose, and some brittle part of mind begins to relax. He loves honeybees, which bear their own magic and don't mind sharing what they make with it. He walks into the room, glancing down at the Persian rug on the floor that still tingles beneath the soles of his boots with the magic that wove it. Sitting down on the bed reveals that the house elves truly didn't know when to stop, but he doesn't mind. Instead of bounty ticking, he's sitting on that thick material encased in soft cloth, just like what he'd slept on last night. Over that are sheets of cotton that were beaten soft over the years. His, definitely. He dyed them a deep gray, the color of winter sky, because it tended to reflect the least amount of extra colors. The frame is the same well-turned ash, polished and protected by the beeswax that greeted him in the doorway. The elves matched a freestanding wardrobe and chest of drawers to the ash. Both hold all the clothing he'd owned in 1017, leaving the chest at the foot of his bed empty but for a spare pair of boots. More preservation magic sings beneath his hands, along with liberal helpings of fresh lavender to keep the blasted mouths out. Nearly 1,000 years, and magic still won't keep those fluttering little bastards at bay, Nazar murmurs. He glances through drawers in the wardrobe, bemused by the sight of unharmed old road silk, tunics, long vests, shirts, robes, truas, socks, braids, gloves, and a light silk-blended wool cloak with a hood for spring or fall storms. There is also a hooded woolen cloak meant for cold winter rain. In the east he'd found loose full-length silk truies, much closer to modern trousers, the tied closed at the waist. The matching shirts are cuffed tightly at the wrist. They're meant to be worn as a bottom layer for outdoor clothing. Nazar just loves having them to sleep in. He won't have all of it retailored, not when this is what Nazar finds familiar. In the meantime, at least he has something to wear. The last drawer he glances at and slides it closed. He won't get rid of that either, but he will likely not have much use for leather armor. Nazar leaves the bedroom open, the better for the soothing beeswax to spread throughout his quarters, and then enters the room which once held Galliana's bedchamber. It became storage after her wedding, and hosts blank parchment in flat and rolled form, the rarer rolls of paper, all of which waits to become letters or books. Did he write a book? That would be nice to know. If it survived the years, he wondered if anyone bothered to translate it. 4 portraits hang on the wall. Each has a muted black background with other hues swimming in the layers of paint. 4 empty frames. Godric, Helga, Rowena, and Salazar, perhaps? He wonders where they are. Hogwarts portraits seem to be gossipy painted biddies, so they have to know he's here. The only other things in the room at the moment is another armchair and a large oak trunk, gifted to him by a friend who'd come into more money than he knew what to do with. That had been... He can't remember, damn it. Nazar kneels down in front of it, running his hands over the wood. Please tell me I was smart enough to leave myself a letter, please. Even if it's not legible, those memories will come back. And they are coming back. He planned for contingencies. He might also have planned for this. The lock is engaged, but falls open at Nazar's touch. He throws back the lid in some vain hope that it will spark some more memory other than pathetic bits floating around in his head. Sitting on top is a simple framed painting of a white owl. Oh, hello. Aren't you gorgeous? The owl blinks at him before letting out a gentle hooted greeting. No, sorry. I don't speak owl. Nazar turns the owl's frame around in his hands. No nameplate. Of course not. That would be easy, wouldn't it? The owl hoots again. Even to Nazar, the owl sounds irritated. Well, I'm sorry, but you're dealing with a partial amnesiac ex-portrait, Nazar tells the owl. He puts her painting aside, propping it against the wall. If someone left him in a trunk for untold years, he'd be irritable too. The portrait was hiding a tightly rolled black dyed fur cloak, backed by sturdy wool that can soak up all the snow it likes while still keeping Nazar warm. He just isn't sure why that cloak would be in the trunk when the rest of his clothing was properly stored in that wardrobe. He lifts it up, curious, and a wand falls out of its hiding place in the fur to land on the floor with an accusatory clatter. Nazar shakes his head and drapes the cloak over the trunk lid before bending down to pick up the wand. It's varnished with a wooden die, so he has no idea what type of tree it's made from. He points it and finds it doesn't feel right in his hand. Not like his cherry wand. Think, damn it, Nazar tells himself. He and Salazar carried twin wands. Not this varnished one, but the cherry with its carved runes. They were granted those wands in 996. This must be the wand he held before that time, even if he still can't remember it. He puts the wand atop the cloak and finds a blade next, sheathed in leather decorated with Futhorc runes. The black hilt feels familiar, and when he draws forth the sax, he remembers it. His first blade purchase on the Isle, crafted by an excellent blacksmith working out of London. Kans's mother made certain it's far deadlier than it looks, at least if he needs a knife for mundane reasons. He came out of the portrait with the blade in his boot still in place. Nazar turns the sheath around so the runes make sense. That is, guardian. That is less than useful. He sheathes the sax and puts it with the wand and cloak. The next layer of the trunk holds correspondence from his family, friends, Salazar. So much from so many. You'll need to be able to read some of the old languages again to know what each missive says. There is also a scroll still bearing an unbroken waxed green Dislizar seal. But what Nazar's hands find first is the carefully composed and flattened sheet of parchment that recorded Bryce's death. Nazar traces his fingers over the old English letters, and the words come to him. Gilbert Bryce Dislizars of Edinburgh, respected magician and warrior in the kingdom of Alba, died of injuries received during a battle to defeat the terrible evil of one using foul magic to enslave the defenseless. Gilbert Bryce Deslizars is to be entombed in Edinburgh, with full honors granted to a warrior on 14th November, this year of our Lord, 1012. Nazar gently puts the record of death back in with the rest of the correspondence. The wand and the sax also go back inside, though he bundles the cloak under his arm to join the rest of his things in the wardrobe. He shuts the trunk, his eyes burning with tears he refuses to let fall. Perhaps there are answers lurking within those papers, like that scroll with its unbroken seal. But Nazar knows how much he can bear in one evening. He directs his attention back to the owl's painting, which is gazing up at him expectantly. You need to be properly hung, not left in a trunk. Would you mind remaining in my quarters until I remember who you are? I'll find a painting of something outdoors for you to swap into if things are too dull. The owl hoots in what Nazar thinks is agreement. He brings her portrait out into the sitting room, realizes he doesn't have much wall space, and mounts the painting to the left of his sitting room window. The painting for her to explore will be placed on the other side of the window. He'll have to find something they both like. He goes back to his bedroom and opens the wardrobe long enough to hang the fur cloak inside, next to a heavy wool cloak that's meant for winter rain rather than snowfall. That done, Nazar swabs the S on his door and opens it again. Beyond the doorway is the office he cobbled together during 25 years of teaching. He knows this room, but his memories of life are so garbled that someone could have inverted the room's entire contents, and he wouldn't know. There is still an illuminated manuscript lying open on his desk. It's not Christian, but Pictish in nature, and the figures on the page are still roaming up and down their assigned decorative spaces. He knows he spoke and read Pictish. He can't remember a word of it. He goes around his slanted desk, ignoring the wooden chair behind it, and peers at the mirror hanging on the wall. He allows instinct to carry him when knowledge fails, breathing on the glass and saying, "Receiving hall." The image becomes that of the receiving hall as it must be at the moment, filled with students in black robes, their collars marked by the 4 differing house colors. Nazar knows every Slytherin at the table, and it doesn't make him happy to see that they are all holding themselves aloof from the other houses, or taunting someone at another table. He knows it's necessary. It's another step in the deception of his friend has needed to practice. He can still find their behavior to be in poor taste and bad manners. Nazar glances up at a long table which must host Hogwarts teachers. There is Severus, a frown lined between his eyes. Dumbledore is back in one of those eye-blinding robes, the utter horror. Many magicians are seated at that table, but Nazar only recognizes one of them as being of his house. Oh, that explains so much about young Ginger's attitude, Nazar mutters. There are 19 teachers at that table, and only one is a Slytherin. Severus told him he was the only one, yes, but that was 1982. It's now late in 1995. Why has that lack not been rectified? Dumbledore had no idea they were suddenly going to gain a second, literal Slytherin. Nazar is going to have words with that spangled fiend after he begs the man to please change his bloody robes. Nazar blows on the silver-backed glass again. Salazar's quarters. That gives him nothing but darkness. Damn it. Rowena's quarters. Darkness. Helga's home? That gives him an intriguing image of a barrel, but nothing else. Asking his mirror for Godric's home gets him the headmaster's tower, which is, well, actually, that explains a lot. If Salazar left on some mad quest to figure out how to help the sibling that was magically locked into a painting, Godric was the best choice for ultimately running the school. Rona and Helga both liked being teachers more than they liked dealing with the local tribal heads, kings, or the associated irritating nobility. Fuck. Nazar collapses into the worn wooden chair, giggling like he's lost his mind. I can't read anything in this room. He knows he could once read or speak Norn, Gaelic, Cumbric, Pictish, Francais, and modern English's Germanic precursor they now call Old English, but he doesn't remember them, none of them. The books in his painting had updated themselves with the language just as his speaking had updated itself with the centuries of change until modern English became standard. I'm probably lucky I know enough Latin to cast a decent spell, he says, still laughing in his hands. Nazar grabs a random book from his shelf, all of them pristine from being held in layers of preservation magic, and opens it. That is definitely Cumbric, not to be mistaken for Cumbrian, damned melting pot of an island and its incessant input of new languages. The fact that English as a language stabilized at all is probably due to divine intervention. The ink in the pot is dried flakes. The quill next to it is fine, if in need of sharpening. Nazar picks it up in his hands. How long since he wrote anything down? He'd written of things while in his portrait, but all of that was destroyed when the preservation charm ended. Nazar puts down the book, frowning. He plans for contingencies like he breathes. He draws his wand from his sleeve, running his fingers along the Futhor Krum patterning, he thinks. Please tell me I was smart, please. And then points his wand at the shelves. Arces libri metamorph magi. 4 books on the shelves rattle in place, but at least they don't fly out to swat at him for the abrupt summons. Nazar grabs them all and sits down at his slanted table. All 4 bound books are red. All are the same size. All are bound by the same material. Nazar opens each one to its first page with text and is confronted by Pictish, Cumbric, bloody French, and modern English. Nazar puts his head down on his desk. I was smart. Oh, I was smart. An updating spell by duplication of material, leaving the original untouched. Then he sits back up. Yes, finally, I did something that wasn't ludicrous today. Also, dear gods, how did anyone forget that metamorph magi is a form of magic? It's in the fucking name. He puts the Cumbric, Pictish, and French copies back onto the shelf while holding on to the English version. Metamorph magician. Why are people stupid, Kanza? Is that rhetorical? She asks. Probably. It usually is. Yes?